Hi, it's Karen here from the Project Management Success Team, and we're here with session 2 of our series on PMBOK Explained, which is about project lifecycle and organisation. So let's get into it. Here we go. So, just as an overview of what we'll be looking at, we'll be looking at the project lifecycle, projects versus operational work, stakeholders and organisational influences on project management. Now, the project lifecycle, projects regardless of the size and complexity generally have the same life cycle structure. You have a starting out area of the life cycle, organising and preparing, carrying out the actual work, and then closing off the project. And so each project that you are involved in will have this sort of life cycle. And this is how it's represented. This image is from the PMBOK manual, and just showing you how down here we have the starting the project part of the life cycle, the organisation and preparation stage, carrying out the actual work, which is the bulk of the project life cycle theoretically, and closing the project. And as you can see here, you have some key project management outputs that occur along the way. So the project charter up the start there, the project management plan, at the end of that organisation and preparation phase, the actual deliverables of the project after carrying out the work, and then closing off the project. You have archived project documents at the completion. And this also shows you that this is the cost and staffing level. So costs theoretically start out lower. They get higher during this phase here, and then during the actual work, it's the bulk of the cost of the project generally. And then costs drop off and again over here. Now this next image is actually quite a good one. It shows you, this is a project time along the bottom here, and high to low scale over here. And what it's showing you is at the start of the project, your cost of the project and also the cost of changes to the project in this stage are obviously a lot lower because you haven't actually built anything yet. But as you're getting into the actual project deliverables being constructed or developed, costs of changing things do go up. And obviously toward the end of the project, I mean, you know, if you've spent all your money building it and then you want to change it there, costs become expensive toward there. So just showing you how that cost of changes throughout the project lifecycle. Also over here, the stakeholder influence, risk and uncertainty is high at that beginning phase, and you'll have a lot heavier sort of stakeholder influence and engagement here to ensure that risks are mitigated, people have their expectations are going to be met, and that they understand what you're building and happy for you to proceed. And once all that stuff is sort of organised in that early preparatory phases, then that sort of level of risk and uncertainty tends to drop off, and the stakeholder influence or involvement can also decrease in that phase there as well, which cannot be a good thing depending on the project. I mean, if all your stakeholders are involved up here, then they drop off as you're starting to come across issues during your project and you need their input, but they're not around to give it to you. That can be a hard thing because the end here you front up with your deliverables, and they suddenly decide that what you've got isn't what they thought they were getting at the start there, and that's because you made a whole bunch of decisions here that they weren't involved in. So keeping that stakeholder involvement or engagement, particularly the people who need to sign off on products, is important during that phase there. But anyway, that's on me just jumping ahead there. So project phases. So the project life cycle is pretty much, you know, all projects, regardless of size and complexity, follow that life cycle structure. But within projects, there are phases. So they are divisions within a project. And they can be sequential or overlapping phases or iterative phases. And phases allow a project to be segmented into logical subsets, and that's for ease of management, planning and control. And each phase can have a differ in size or complexity, priority, the impact it has on the project. Each phase generally has a distinct focus of work. And what you'll see is that the end of phases usually results in a transfer of work or a handoff of some kind. And in PMBOK, there are a series of this sort of handoffs or transfer of work that can occur, called phase exits or it can be a milestone, or a phase gate, a decision gate, a stage gate, or even what they call a kill point, which you can probably get the gist of what that means. Now, those terms are explained obviously a lot more in detail in the PMBOK manual, and perhaps later on throughout this course we might meet a few of those again. Now, the primary objective of each phase of a project requires an extra degree of control to be achieved, and PMBOK uses 5 process groups to do this, and we'll be learning about those as we go. So what's the difference between project work and operational work? Well, generally, operations are ongoing and they produce, actually. I'll fix that up for the slides to download. They produce repetitive products, services, or results. Gee, I've made a few errors there, haven't I? Projects are temporary and they end, whereas operational work tends to be ongoing and doesn't terminate when the current objectives are met. Operational work can change, though, over time, and it should, to meet the organisation strategy. So projects are usually temporary with an immediate objective that needs to be met and have an end point, whereas operational work that contributes to the business and the ongoing operations of the business doesn't just terminate when a project ends. Stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are really important in a project, and I tell you, if you could run a project without stakeholders, look, I'm all for practical project management, so I'm telling it like it is. If you could run a project without stakeholders, it would be such a dream. But reality is that you have stakeholders. There are people or organisations who are involved in the project who have an interest in the project and the project outcome. And those people exert influence over the project, the deliverables and the resources. Now, stakeholders can be internal to your own organisation or external to the organisation. And that may be, the stakeholders basically can be customers, users, sponsors of the project, the board, project managers or general managers for that matter, a project management office, project team, business partners, anybody who has anything to do with the project or any involvement in the project or interest in its outcome or say in its outcome are considered stakeholders of the project. And we do stakeholder evaluation up front of the project because stakeholders need to be managed. You need to communicate with them and you need to often review products. It needs to go through some of these stakeholders, and sign-off needs to be achieved through these stakeholders. So you do need to put some time into thinking about how you're going to manage stakeholders, who you need to communicate, and what information they need to know and when they need to be involved in the project. And that's really important. Organisational influences on project management. Now, there are a few of those. The organisation culture and styles really does impact upon how projects can be managed. And that is the vision, the values, the norms and beliefs and expectations within an organisation really do influence. And that could be within the project management or the people who are delivering, the suppliers of the goods, their organisational culture and styles, as well as the customer's culture and style. And that also includes policies, methods and procedures, authority relationships within the organisations, and the work ethic and hours that are put in from the parties involved. Now, those things can vary from organisation to organisation. I've been involved in working with organisations who have a very, for example, I work with a large organisation here who have very good policy, methods and procedures. They have very defined authority relationships, good work ethic and hours that are set out and known prior. And everything runs, according to methodology, which to me is amazing because hardly ever does a project run according to the way it's supposed to run. But in this particular organisation, I know that when we run a project with that organisation, when I'm managing a project for them, that the project will run by the book, so to speak. And that doesn't mean it runs quick, mind you, because overhead is overhead, but it does run by the book. Whereas other organisations are really slap bang, get this out, we don't have time for that, blah, 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 and you've really got to cut and run and do the best you can. So that's just differences in cultures and styles. Organisational structure, that affects the availability of resources and how the projects are conducted. And things that you need to consider there are like the project manager authority, the resource availability, control of the project budget, who has control of that budget, the project manager's role or what the organisation sees their role as, and what sort of project management administration staff are available. Organisational process assets. Now that means any or all process related assets that can be used to influence project success. Now that means things like formal plans, policies, procedures, guidelines, corporate knowledge bases, standardised guidelines, work instructions, and organisational communication requirements and systems. Where people have systems in place, and they do this often, then they will have systems in place, then that can really influence how the project can be managed. Because if you've got supports, resources, structures, templates, all the things available to you from prior experience and prior projects, then that can be very helpful as a project manager, as opposed to like walking in from scratch, beginning with nothing and needing to build those things up as you go. So that brings us to the end of the session 2 content. As I said, I just want to reiterate what the series is about for those who may not have seen session 1. It's a 12-part series, and it's giving you the whirlwind tour of PMBOK. So it's providing a practical summary as well as a few of my practical tips and experiences along the way. It's useful for beginners or experienced PMs just looking at a refresh of PMBOK. Simple, clear, down-to-earth explanation is what I'm aiming for and hopefully delivering. What this series isn't, it isn't a comprehensive coverage of the entire manual. It really is that bird's eye level overview. It isn't preparation for your PMP exam, but we can tell you where to get help with that. And please go and see us at projectmanagementsuccess.net, where I've got a review of a really great PMP exam preparation product called PM Prepcast. So check at projectmanagementsuccess.net and you can see our review of it there. What's in the next session? Well, next session, we're actually starting to get down to some of the nitty-gritty, which should be really interesting. Project management processes, and what are they? And just to remind you guys that the material for these presentations is coming from a guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, the 4th edition, or the PMBOK guide, otherwise known as. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.